prompted, well, this? You see, back before CES, New Year's, and even Christmas, I had another friend, let's call him Rhino, whose PC started to act up. It wouldn't boot some days, it would only get to the home screen on others, and sometimes it would crash on a single task. What he thought was 2 sticks of 8GB of RAM turned out to be 8GB of RAM in total, and one of them was on the frets. Flipping into BIOS gave us a true reading of 4GB. We were down to 1 single stick, and it was time to upgrade. But that got me thinking. Upgrade, but by how much? The games he plays aren't that graphically intensive. Currently, the newest game he has is Age of Mythology, and he's only viewing it on a 1080p monitor. So what's the point of going all out if he doesn't really have to? I mean, how good is good enough? Today, we try and answer that question with a set of both new and used parts to see how far we really need to go to achieve a respectable gaming experience. First up, let's evaluate what we're working with. We'll start with our currently hobbled Ryzen 5 2400G and see what we can muscle out of its Vega 11 graphics. The goal will be able to play on 1080p high and get at least 60 FPS. For this first round though, I'm not expecting much. We have so little RAM right off the get-go that I'm gonna have to record the first test with my camera instead of a recording software. We'll start in Age of Mythology and see what we're working with. Well, drivers are out of date. That's not great. At least this way we'll see what my buddy was working with anyway. Ooh, that is one jittery bird. I really don't think I believe that FPS. Let's play a quick skirmish and see what we've got. And we're in. 45 FPS? I mean, I'm on 1080p low for every setting, but this is still running pretty darn choppy. Let's add some more buildings and troops and see what it does then. Yep, as I expected, started to drop, and it did not take much. Then again, this game is pretty demanding for this type of hardware, and I don't think that a 2400G is technically within spec. Let's lowball the next game to see if we can get something that'll play above 60 FPS. Supreme Commander 2. That should be old enough to game on. 30 FPS? Let's see if we can change that in settings. Low 50 FPS in the menu. I guess I'll take it. We'll start the game, and did you see that hiccup? Hopefully she doesn't blow up on load-in. Okay, now that we're in, what have we got? 90 plus FPS? Yes! Finally, something that runs okay. It's not quite the victory we're looking for, but at least it's a start. Now let's look at Borderlands 2, and it's not looking great. We still haven't reached 60 FPS in any menu. We'll start up the game. Oof, big frame dips. And not too bad. Let's run the game a bit, see what happens. When fighting technicals with a fair amount of particles, the frame rate takes a sizable dip, dropping below 30. About the only time I could get consistent FPS was when I would stare straight up at the sky. Not really gameplay, but it does show 60 FPS with 1.5 sticks of RAM is still possible. I played for about 20-25 minutes as I watched CES to see if much else would change. I know that's not very long to test, but considering that the computer hadn't crashed in that time frame, I'm still taking it as a win. Another plus is that our loud fans have kept temperatures low, with spikes in the low 50s on a stock cooler. But that's ultimately where the positives end. This hardware is old, and it ultimately feels like it's going to explode. But let's at least give it a second chance at life, and see if adding a new set of RAM can get us back to good enough. We'll pull out the PC and take it to the table for disassembly. For this case, we simply need to take off the top by removing a couple of thumb studs for access. And, well, there goes that one. Oh well. On to our RAM. We have a 16GB set of DDR4 RAM rated for 3600 MHz. Should be enough to get us back from the brink. The thing is though, will it be enough to make a performance difference? We'll just chuck these. Throw in our new set. And set our tower back up. Let's see where we are at now. Haha! Finally, some stable RAM, and we have it running at what my buddy Rhino originally thought it was. The good news is that we can run more than one program now. However, I'm going to be running OBS from here on out. Not just to record the gameplay, but also to simulate multiple programs running at once. From my observations, this ultimately dropped in-game performance by as much as 20%, but here's the thing. None of this is worth it if we can't run more than one program without the PC crashing. So was adding RAM enough to bring this 7-year-old PC back from the brink? Well, it turns out, actually, no. Between display issues, recording woes, and at least 8 crashes in about an hour, we were no closer to a better performing PC. About the only footage I had recorded that ended up decent was surprisingly some 4K footage of Supreme Commander 2. That being said, 40 FPS even at 4K resolution and recording at 1080p is not that impressive on such an undemanding game. Switching over to Age of Mythology's main menu showed a better metric for 1080p performance. At mid 20 FPS, we've definitely taken a step back. Our bird is still struggling to keep pace. We can technically run the game full screen on 1080p low, but it's still very choppy. The best way to run both now is in windowed mode, and that still only nets us about 10 to 12 frames. Thanks, but no thanks. Borderlands didn't fare much better either. Obviously, my recording settings were jacked up, and I couldn't figure out why at the time. We can upscale this so it's easier to see though. Getting back to the game itself, about all the RAM did for this game was spike CPU temps by about 10 degrees Celsius. Not surprising with us taxing the integrated graphics to its absolute limit. However, playing without OBS didn't gain enough frames to say that twice the amount of RAM was enough to make a difference. And by difference, I mean crashing. After having so many crashes, I decided to throw in the towel and just call out the big guns. We needed an experienced contender, someone who's taken just about as many hits as he's given. Say hello to the MSI GTX 1070 Armor OC. She may not be able to go toe-to-toe with the new kids, but in this company, with these games, I'm willing to bet she'll be punching well above her weight class. You're going in just like that. Now let's tackle round 1. This time, Borderlands is up first, and right out of the gate, we've already shattered our previous frame rates. The consistency is a little spotty compared to its modern counterparts, but the 1070 brings the gameplay well above our previous target. Even going back to our little rock shows that we can still technically get over 200 FPS in 1080p low. 300% improvement for 0 gameplay? Yes please! Considering that the goal was 1080p high though, let's bump up the quality and see how much the game changes. Hey, not bad on the menu screen. Let's see how it is out of the gate. Oh, okay. There we go. Not bad. I'd say we're doing pretty good here. Dropping below 100 FPS definitely roughs up the smoother feeling we had, but it's still a measurable win. For fun, I brought it up to 4K high, and we lost about half of our frames immediately. It starts to become quite egregious when we do things like surf through various menus. However, to this 9-year-old card's credit, it is making quite the convincing argument to keep your old GPU. Sure, it may not be the latest and greatest, but it's giving better performance at a way higher fidelity than where we started at. And don't forget, again, OBS is running in the background. This would easily run 60 FPS if we stopped recording in 4K. Moving on to Supreme Commander 2, we're somehow running at 65,000% of our GPU, but all things considered, that's not bad on our temperatures. That being said, we seem to be deadlocked around 99 FPS, so let's bump up the fidelity here. Well, the game certainly looks better, which I mean is astonishing, considering how little we're using that GPU now, but it's obviously too old of a game to measure. Let's at least see if we can get better than 40 FPS in 4K from our previous test. And it's like we didn't even change our settings. Our GPU is starting to lift 3 grains of rice instead of 1, but this game runs perfect. If my buddy Rhino wants to add another 500 hours to it, he'll have no problem enjoying this game to its fullest. Now let's take a look at the new kid on the block and the whole reason for this upgrade. And holy cow, we're pegged to the maximum 144 FPS. This is incredible. From struggling to get 30 FPS in the menu to now hitting its limit. But does that performance translate to the gameplay? Yes, it does. Achieving well over 100 FPS, the experience goes from barely usable to actually playable. But we didn't come here for low graphics. Let's bump it up to high and see where we land. Starting on 1080p Mythic begins to show the cracks in our 1070s armor. Sure, it runs over 60 FPS, but it does so with a decent amount of tearing. Turning on VSync really enhances the performance here, but only at a ooh, my left side is my good side kind of level. Once we zoom out, we drop frames all over the floor, sometimes capping at 30 FPS. To combat this, had to go back to the original goal of high settings, and the gameplay quality ended up following. For fun, since we tested the other games in 4K, I decided to test this one in 4K. Sure, it did beat out its integrated predecessor by twice the amount of frames. However, it still wasn't really enough of an improvement to recommend when 1080p feels so much better. And I've got to say that for just $130, I think we crushed it. The performance is light years beyond where we started, and all it took was a second-hand graphics card and some brand new RAM. But the question at the top of our video was, how good is good enough? The wrinkle in our little inquiry is that I'm not the one who gets to cast the final die. So when I told my buddy Rhino about the performance, he said, Well, okay then. The man paid for the whole board, and he's getting the whole board. And, well, obviously, everything else that needs to go into it. If we take this here, maybe give it some time, and voila! Let's do that again. Sweet! The PC came to me. I think we can swap the boards out on our own and put in the work. We'll just need to grab our tools, find the screws, line up the holes, and bolt the board. Oh, come on! It's too long? I knew this build was going too smoothly. Well, no amount of peekaboo is going to solve this dilemma. The goal was not to go all out! Well, I guess it's time to build another PC the old-fashioned way. Come on, board. And voila! What's old is now new again. Let's take her for a spin. Dropping ourselves back into Borderlands, we receive a mixed bag of information. On the one hand, this game looks and feels buttery smooth in 1080p. On the other, temps have certainly climbed for how little we are using the CPU, and the push-in from the recording wasn't just from me forgetting OBS settings. Let's play for a little bit and see if anything else happens. After only a few minutes of play, temps climbed above 70 degrees Celsius. A few times when booting into a game or a menu, the temperatures would spike dramatically to 95 degrees Celsius. Turns out, this is pretty normal for 7700X. So normal, in fact, that there are multiple videos on how to undervolt this particular CPU so it isn't pegging the proverbial red line. Let's just exit back to the home screen for now. What's going on here? Oh? Oh, I haven't seen this little trick since Windows XP. I guess we have our work cut out for us. Well, visually everything looks fine, but now I have to troubleshoot. Why, you ask? Because now Windows isn't activated for some unknown reason. I'm basically showing you all of this to say that putting new wine into old wineskins tends to burst the bottle. But after many tweaks and an undervolt for the very thermal revving 7700X, we were finally able to play without hiccups. Going back to Borderlands 2, we have dropped CPU temps considerably, with spikes dropping from 95 degrees Celsius to 85 degrees Celsius. Once the CPU settles in, we are looking at a much healthier range of 55 to 60 degrees Celsius. Some will probably argue that by undervolting, we will have lost some frames. Maybe, but I don't think so. Want proof?
It's perfect! That's peak gameplay, people!
On to 4K, and boy does it look beautiful. Loads in pretty quick too. Let's move on to the technical destruction. 4K runs between 40 to 60 FPS. Not bad, not bad. Going back to our peak realistically shows that we've dropped 2/3 of our performance. Considering 4K testing is more for fun, that drop is good enough for us. Anything going on in Supreme Commander 2? I guess we're attacking now. How about 4K? No change? What about all this firepower? Okay, how about blowing up a commander? Yes! Finally we got the game to do something. And now, Age of Mythology. We are doing pretty good in the menu, and our bird is looking very crisp. Gameplay-wise, we're looking at a choppy, high 80s performance, and we're going to pull that back with VSync to a very smooth 60 FPS. Frames did drop, however, with larger events on the map, such as with this earthquake. However, this is a very enjoyable experience in comparison to where we started. I could actually focus on fighting the Greeks with Canadian laser bears instead of, graphical nitpicks. 4K low settings was also technically playable, but not at a high enough polish to recommend. Large groups of enemies were usually fine. However, any building destruction would just tank the FPS. Still better than what we started with, though. Speaking of which, here's the comparisons from beginning to end. It's not perfect, but it gives you a general idea of the performance at each resolution for each game. Some of the early FPS numbers are approximate because of recording the game, then recording the FPS, and going back and forth. But overall, I'm happy with the build. games like Supreme Commander didn't change too much during the process because of their age. However, it was surprising just how many frames could be pulled from some of these older games. And Age of Mythology? Well, I think it practically speaks for itself.
Λέγε. Ναι. Πρόσταγμα. Εισβολή.
Now the question at hand, but was Rhino happy about it? Yes, he was finally happy with his new PC. And I think that's the real takeaway from this build. When it comes down to it, the latest tech or the best marketing in the world can't decide what is best for you. And for Rhino, this was good enough for him. Thanks for watching, and God bless.